In the quaint town of Sierra Verde, nestled among towering mountains and sprawling coffee plantations, Sofia Martinez walked home after another exhausting shift at the local clinic. The evening sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets as she adjusted her worn nursing bag on her shoulder. At 28, she had mastered the art of hiding her exhaustion behind a gentle smile, a skill that served her well both at work and at home with her ailing grandmother. The central plaza, usually bustling with activity, had grown quiet as the day drew to a close. Only a few scattered tourists lingered, taking photos of the colonial architecture that made Sierra Verde a hidden gem in the region. Sofia's footsteps echoed against the stone pathways as she made her way across the square, her mind already racing through the list of tasks awaiting her at home. That's when she heard it, a haunting melody that seemed to float on the evening breeze. The sound stopped her in her tracks, drawing her attention to a solitary figure seated on one of the weathered wooden benches. A man dressed in clothes that had seen better days cradled what appeared to be a handmade string instrument. His fingers moved with surprising grace across the strings, creating music that spoke of profound sadness and longing. Sofia found herself moving closer, drawn by both the melody and something indefinable in the man's demeanor. As she approached, she noticed the fine lines around his eyes, suggesting he was perhaps in his late 30s, though there was something timeless about his appearance. His dark hair, slightly unkempt, fell across his forehead as he played, completely absorbed in his music. The fresh bread in her bag, still warm from the bakery, suddenly felt heavy in her hand. Without thinking twice, Sofia broke off a piece and approached the mysterious musician. "Would you like some?" she offered, her voice gentle as if afraid to break the spell his music had cast over the plaza. The man looked up, startled by her presence. His eyes, a striking shade of amber, met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. When he spoke, his accent was distinctly foreign, though she couldn't quite place it. "Thank you," he said, simply accepting the bread with a slight bow of his head. "Your kindness is unexpected." "Everyone deserves a little kindness," Sofia replied, settling onto the bench beside him. "I'm Sofia. I haven't seen you around here before." "Ahmed," he offered after a moment's hesitation, as if unused to sharing even this small detail about himself. "I'm just passing through." His fingers absently stroked the strings of his instrument, creating soft, melodic whispers. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun continued its descent behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Sofia found herself sharing stories about her work at the clinic, her dreams of becoming a doctor, and the challenges of caring for her grandmother. Ahmed listened intently, offering occasional comments that revealed both wisdom and genuine interest. As darkness began to fall, Sofia reluctantly stood to leave. "I should get home. My grandmother will be waiting." She hesitated, then added, "Will you be here tomorrow?" Ahmed's response was cryptic. "Perhaps our paths will cross again, Sofia Martinez." The way he said her full name, which she hadn't shared with him, sent a slight shiver down her spine. The walk home seemed different somehow, charged with an energy she couldn't explain. Sofia's mind kept returning to the mysterious musician and his haunting melody. There was something about him, a depth of character, a hidden story, that intrigued her beyond reason. The following morning, Sofia opened her front door to collect the morning newspaper and found an elegant cream-colored envelope resting on her doorstep. Her name was written across the front in flowing script. Inside, she found a single sheet of expensive paper containing a brief message. "You saw me when others looked away. Come find me." Below the message was an address she didn't recognize, somewhere in the mountains outside of town. Sofia stood in her doorway, the morning sun warming her face as she considered the note. Common sense told her to ignore it, to continue with her routine and forget about the mysterious stranger. But something deeper, perhaps the same instinct that had led her to share her bread the previous evening, urged her to follow this unexpected thread. Little did Sofia know that this simple decision, whether to pursue the mystery or remain within the safe confines of her familiar world, would set in motion a chain of events that would transform not only her life, but the entire community of Sierra Verde. The mysterious musician had awakened something in her soul, a longing for something more than the careful, responsible life she had built for herself. As she prepared for her morning shift at the clinic, Sophia tucked the envelope into her pocket, its presence a constant reminder of the choice that lay before her. The mountain address beckoned like a siren song, promising answers to questions she hadn't even known she was asking. The day stretched ahead, filled with its usual responsibilities, but now tinged with the possibility of something extraordinary waiting just beyond the horizon. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent when Sophia finally gathered the courage to follow the mysterious directions. She had changed out of her nurse's uniform into a simple blue dress, debating with herself until the last moment about the wisdom of this adventure. The address led her along a winding mountain road she'd never explored, despite having lived in Sierra Verde her entire life. Her small car struggled against the steep incline as the road narrowed and curved through dense coffee plantations. The familiar sight of cultivated rows gave way to wild vegetation, and just when Sophia began to wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake, the trees parted to reveal a sight that took her breath away. There, perched on a natural terrace carved into the mountainside, stood a magnificent colonial mansion that seemed to belong to another era entirely. The structure was a masterpiece of Spanish colonial architecture, its white walls gleaming in the late afternoon light. Wrought iron balconies adorned with trailing bougainvillea wrapped around the second floor, while massive wooden doors dominated the ground-level entrance. A fountain burbled quietly in the center of a circular driveway, its waters catching the sun's rays and throwing rainbow reflections against the mansion's facade. Sophia parked her car beside the fountain, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The grounds were immaculately maintained, a stark contrast to the shabby appearance of the man she'd met in the plaza. As she approached the entrance, the massive doors swung open silently, revealing a figure that made her stop in her tracks. Ahmed stood in the doorway, but he was transformed. Gone were the worn clothes and disheveled appearance. In their place stood a man dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his dark hair neatly styled, his bearing that of someone accustomed to command. Only his eyes remained unchanged, the same intense amber gaze that had caught her attention in the plaza. "Welcome, Sophia," he said, his accent now more pronounced, rich with the flavors of the Middle East. "I'm pleased you decided to come." He gestured for her to enter, and Sophia found herself stepping into a world that seemed pulled from the pages of a fairy tale. The entrance hall soared 2 stories high, dominated by a crystal chandelier that cast prismatic light across marble floors. Ancient Persian rugs softened the space, their intricate patterns telling stories Sophia could only guess at. The walls were adorned with artwork that even her untrained eye could tell was valuable, perhaps priceless. "I imagine you have questions," Ahmed said, leading her through the hall into a sunny conservatory filled with exotic plants. A table had been set with an elegant tea service, complete with delicate pastries and fresh fruit. "Please sit. I owe you an explanation." Sophia sank into a comfortable chair, her mind struggling to reconcile the humble musician from the plaza with this clearly wealthy man before her. "Who are you?" she asked simply, watching as he poured tea into fine bone china cups. Ahmed's hand stilled for a moment before he answered. "My full name is Ahmed al-Rashid. I am, or was, the head of one of the largest business empires in the Middle East." He passed her a cup, the porcelain warm against her fingers. "What you saw in the plaza was not entirely a deception. It was simply another facet of who I am, or perhaps who I wish to be." "But why?" Sophia found herself asking. "Why the disguise? Why here in Sierra Verde?" A shadow passed across Ahmed's face as he settled into the chair opposite her. "Sometimes, Sophia, the weight of responsibility becomes too heavy to bear. My family's empire spans generations, but with it comes expectations, obligations, and countless individuals who see you not as a person, but as a means to their own ends." He paused, studying the steam rising from his cup. "After certain events in my life, I needed to discover who I was beyond my name and position." Sophia listened, fascinated, as Ahmed described his journey from boardrooms and palaces to the simple life of a wandering musician. He spoke of the freedom he found in anonymity, the peace in creating music without expectation or judgment. But beneath his words, she sensed a deeper pain, a loneliness that echoed the melancholy she'd heard in his music. "And now?" she asked, gesturing to their opulent surroundings. "Why reveal yourself to me?" Ahmed's expression softened as he looked at her. "Because you showed kindness to a stranger without expecting anything in return. In my world, such genuine gestures are rare, beyond measure." He leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on an earnest quality. "I've watched you, Sophia. I've seen how you care for your patients, how you sacrifice for your grandmother. You possess a quality that all my family's wealth couldn't buy: true compassion." The sun had begun to set, painting the conservatory in warm golden light. Sophia felt as though she'd stepped into a dream, yet something about Ahmed's presence, his story, rang true to her heart. As they continued to talk, the formal atmosphere gradually relaxed, and she found herself sharing more about her own life, her dreams of becoming a doctor, the financial struggles that kept those dreams out of reach, her deep connection to the community of Sierra Verde. As darkness fell and lights automatically illuminated the garden beyond the conservatory windows, Ahmed made an unexpected proposal. "Stay here," he said suddenly. "Not permanently, but for a few days. There's something I'd like to show you, something that could change everything, not just for you, but for all of Sierra Verde." Sophia hesitated, her practical nature warring, with the undeniable pull of adventure and possibility. The sun had completely set now, and the lights of the town twinkled far below like earthbound stars. In that moment, standing between two worlds, Sophia faced a choice that would alter the course of her carefully planned life forever. Sophia's decision to stay at the mansion set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and her place in the world. After a quick call to her grandmother's caretaker to arrange extended assistance, she found herself settling into a guest suite that was larger than her entire house in town. The room's elegant furnishings and silk drapes seemed to belong to another world entirely, but it was the private balcony that truly captured her attention. From there, she could see the entire valley below, the lights of Sierra Verde twinkling like fallen stars. The night air carried the scent of jasmine from the gardens below, mixed with the familiar aroma of coffee plantations in the distance. That first evening, Ahmed invited her to join him for dinner in a formal dining room that could have hosted state dinners. As they sat at opposite ends of a massive mahogany table, Sophia couldn't help but feel the stark contrast between this opulent setting and their first meeting in the plaza. "Tell me about your family's empire," Sophia ventured, watching as servants presented course after course of exquisitely prepared dishes. "What exactly does it encompass?" Ahmed's expression grew thoughtful as he swirled the wine in his crystal glass. "The Al Rashid Group spans everything from oil and real estate to technology and humanitarian initiatives. My great-grandfather started with a single trading vessel, and each generation has expanded our reach." He paused, his eyes distant. "But with growth came complexity, and with complexity came corruption." As the evening progressed, Ahmed revealed more about the circumstances that had driven him to seek solitude in Sierra Verde. His parents had been the victims of a tragic accident 3 years ago, thrusting him into a position of power he wasn't prepared to handle. The burden of leadership, combined with the machinations of ambitious family members, had nearly broken him. "My cousin Karim," Ahmed explained, his voice tight with suppressed emotion, "saw my grief as an opportunity. While I was struggling to cope with the loss, he began systematically undermining my authority, turning board members against me and diverting funds from our charitable foundations." Sophia listened intently, beginning to understand the depth of pain behind the mysterious musician she'd met in the plaza. "But surely there was someone you could trust, someone who could help." Ahmed's bitter laugh echoed in the vast dining room. "Trust becomes a rare commodity when billions are at stake. Every show of support came with strings attached. Every offer of help masked ulterior motives." He stood abruptly, moving to one of the tall windows. "That's why your simple act of kindness affected me so deeply. It was the first genuine interaction I'd had in years. The following morning, Ahmed gave Sophia a tour of the mansion's grounds. The property was extensive, including formal gardens, a small olive grove, and even a private chapel. As they walked, he shared his vision for transforming the estate into something more than a wealthy man's retreat. "This place has the potential to be a cultural center," he explained enthusiastically, gesturing to the various buildings. "We could host art exhibitions, music performances, educational programs. Sierra Verde has so much talent, but no infrastructure to nurture it." Sophia found herself caught up in his excitement, offering suggestions based on her knowledge of the community's needs. "The local school has no music program," she mentioned, "and there are so many talented young artists who can't afford supplies or instruction." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden arrival of a sleek black car. The vehicle's tinted windows rolled down to reveal a face that bore a striking resemblance to Ahmed's, though harder and more calculating. Karim al-Rashid had arrived, unannounced. "Cousin," Karim called out, his accent more pronounced than Ahmed's, "what a charming surprise to find you playing host." His eyes swept over Sophia with barely concealed disdain. "And who might this be?" The tension in the air became palpable as Ahmed stepped slightly in front of Sophia, his posture protective. "Sophia Martinez is my guest, Karim. To what do we owe the pleasure of your visit?" Karim emerged from the car with the fluid grace of a predator. "The board is concerned, cousin. Your extended absence has caused complications, and now we find you here entertaining a local nurse?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "One might question your priorities." The confrontation that followed revealed the deep divisions within the al-Rashid family. Karim spoke of failing investments, dissatisfied shareholders, and the need for Ahmed to return and set things right. But beneath his words lay veiled threats and implications that made Sophia increasingly uneasy. As the day progressed, Sophia witnessed the complex dynamics between the cousins, understanding that she had stumbled into a situation far more complicated than she'd imagined. The simple musician who had touched her heart with his melancholy tunes was actually a key player in a high-stakes family drama that threatened to spill over into her peaceful mountain town. That evening, as she stood on her balcony watching Karim's car disappear down the mountain road, Sophia felt the weight of a decision pressing down on her. Should she remain involved in this world of wealth and intrigue that was so far removed from her own, or return to the simple life she'd always known? The answer came to her as she recalled the passion in Ahmed's voice when he spoke of transforming the mansion into a cultural center. Perhaps she had been brought into his world not just by chance, but by the possibility of creating something meaningful that could benefit her entire community. Little did she know that Karim's arrival was just the beginning of a series of events that would test not only her resolve, but also her growing feelings for the complex man who had invited her into his world. As the lights of Sierra Verde twinkled, below, Sophia made a silent promise to herself to see this adventure through wherever it might lead. The days following Karim's unexpected visit brought a flurry of activity to the mansion. Sophia found herself caught up in a whirlwind of planning sessions as Ahmed threw himself into the cultural center project with renewed vigor. It was as if his cousin's attempts to draw him back into the family business had only strengthened his resolve to create something meaningful in Sierra Verde. One morning, as they sat in the sun-drenched conservatory poring over architectural plans, Sophia finally broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. "Ahmed," she began hesitantly, "I can't help but wonder, why me? Why involve someone you barely know in all of this?" Ahmed set down his pencil and leaned back in his chair, his amber eyes studying her face intently. "Because you represent everything I've been searching for, Sophia. Authenticity, compassion, a genuine desire to help others without expecting anything in return." He paused, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "And perhaps selfishly because I needed someone to remind me of the person I once hoped to be." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Javier, the mansion's groundskeeper and Ahmed's most trusted employee. "Senor," he said, his weathered face creased with concern, "there are some men at the gate. They say they're from the bank. Here to discuss a foreclosure. Ahmed's expression darkened. Foreclosure? That's impossible. This property was purchased outright. He rose quickly, gesturing for Sophia to follow. Let's see what this is about. At the ornate front gates, they found 3 men in expensive suits, their demeanor a mixture of impatience and poorly concealed greed. The leader, a silver-haired man with cold blue eyes, stepped forward. Mr. Al-Rashid, I presume. I'm Ronald. Beggar from International Finance Corporation. We're here about the outstanding loans on this property. There must be some mistake, Ahmed replied firmly. This estate was purchased without any financing. I have the documents to prove it. Beggar's smile was predatory. I'm afraid the situation has changed. Our records show that the property was used as collateral for a series of high-risk investments made in your name over the past year. Those investments have underperformed. As the confrontation unfolded, Sophia watched Ahmed's face carefully. She saw the moment when realization dawned. This was Karim's doing. Somehow he had manipulated the family's assets, putting Ahmed's personal holdings at risk. I'll need time to review these claims, Ahmed stated, his voice tight with controlled anger. You'll hear from my lawyers within the week. After the bankers departed, Ahmed retreated to his study, leaving Sophia to grapple with the implications of what she'd witnessed. This was more than just a family squabble. It was a calculated attempt to strip Ahmed of everything he owned. Later that evening, as they walked through the moonlit gardens, Ahmed finally opened up about the full extent of his family's troubles. Karim's ambition knows no bounds, he explained, his voice heavy with regret. When I left, I thought I was merely stepping away from the responsibility. I never imagined he would go this far. Sophia listened intently, offering silent support, as Ahmed unraveled the complex web of family politics and financial maneuvering that had led to this moment. She began to understand that his retreat to Sierra Verde hadn't just been about finding himself. It had been an escape from a world that was slowly suffocating him. What will you do now? She asked softly as they paused by a burbling fountain. Ahmed turned to her, his expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability that made her heart ache. I have to go back, he said simply. I have to face Karim and reclaim what's mine. Not for the money or the power, but for all the people who depend on our family's businesses and charitable works. A plan began to form as they talked late into the night. Ahmed would return to his homeland, but not as the broken man who had fled years ago. He would go back armed with the renewed sense of purpose that Sierra Verde and Sophia had given him. Come with me, he said suddenly, taking her hands in his. Your perspective, your compassion, they're exactly what I need to navigate the shark circling back home. Sophia felt a thrill of excitement mixed with apprehension. The idea of leaving Sierra Verde, of stepping into Ahmed's world of high finance and family intrigue, both terrified and exhilarated her. But as she looked into his eyes, she knew her decision was already made. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations. Sophia arranged an extended leave from the clinic, entrusting her grandmother's care to her most reliable colleagues. Ahmed was in constant communication with his lawyers, piecing together the extent of Karim's manipulations. As their departure date approached, Sophia found herself on her balcony one last time, gazing down at the twinkling lights of her hometown. She thought about the simple life she was leaving behind, her small house, her work at the clinic, the familiar rhythms of Sierra Verde. But when she turned and saw Ahmed silhouetted in the doorway, she felt a surge of certainty. This journey, wherever it might lead, was one she needed to take. Little did she know that their arrival in Ahmed's homeland would set in motion a chain of events that would test not only their growing bond, but also challenge everything they thought they knew about loyalty, family, and the true nature of wealth. As the sun rose on their final day in Sierra Verde, Sophia and Ahmed stood together at the gates of the mansion, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together. The private jet touched down on the shimmering tarmac of Dubai International Airport, its sleek form a stark contrast to the modest propeller planes Sophia was accustomed to seeing in Sierra Verde. As she descended the stairs onto the sun-baked runway, the heat hit her like a physical force, a far cry from the cool mountain air she'd left behind. Ahmed, who had been tense and preoccupied during much of the flight, seemed to transform before her eyes. His posture straightened, his jaw set with determination, and when he spoke to the waiting staff, his voice carried an authority she hadn't heard before. This was Ahmed al-Rashid, heir to a business empire, not the soulful musician from the plaza. "Welcome to my world," he said softly, guiding her towards a waiting limousine with windows tinted so dark they appeared black. "I apologize in advance for the chaos you're about to witness." The drive from the airport to the al-Rashid family compound was a journey through a landscape of impossible contradictions. Gleaming skyscrapers of glass and steel rose from the desert like mirages, while traditional souks and ancient mosques stood as testament to a culture steeped in history. Sophia pressed her face to the window, drinking in the sights of a world so different from her own. The family compound, when they arrived, was a sprawling oasis of lush gardens and elegant architecture. Fountains sparkled in the sunlight, their gentle music, a counterpoint to the calls to prayer echoing from a nearby minaret. As they stepped from the car, they were greeted by a small army of staff, each moving with the practiced efficiency of those accustomed to catering to the ultra-wealthy. Master Ahmed, a distinguished older man, stepped forward, bowing slightly. "It is good to have you home. Your cousin Karim has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He says it cannot wait." Ahmed's expression tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Thank you, Hassan. Please see that Miss Martinez is settled comfortably in the guest wing. I'll need to review some documents before tomorrow." As Hassan led her through the winding corridors of the mansion, Sophia felt a growing sense of unease. The opulence surrounding her was overwhelming. Priceless artwork adorned walls covered in silk damask, and every surface seemed to gleam with gold or polished marble. It was a world away from the simple beauty of Ahmed's retreat in Sierra Verde. Her room, when she reached it, was larger than her entire house back home. A team of maids unpacked her modest suitcase, each item of clothing treated with the same care as if it were a couture gown. Sophia felt out of place, a simple country nurse adrift in a sea of luxury. That evening, as she prepared for dinner, a soft knock at her door revealed a young woman carrying a garment bag. "Miss Martinez, I'm Amira, Ahmed's sister. I thought you might appreciate something suitable for dinner." The dress Amira had brought was a masterpiece of understated elegance, its deep blue fabric shimmering like the night sky. As Sophia slipped it on, she caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Dinner was a tense affair, despite the sumptuous surroundings. Karim was present, his sharp eyes constantly flicking between Ahmed and Sophia, clearly trying to gauge the nature of their relationship. The conversation danced around business matters and family history, with undercurrents of unspoken tensions swirling beneath every word. As the meal progressed, Sophia began to understand the true complexity of Ahmed's situation. It wasn't just about reclaiming his position in the company. It was about navigating a minefield of family politics, cultural expectations, and generations of accumulated power. Later that night, unable to sleep, Sophia wandered out onto the balcony adjoining her room. The Dubai skyline glittered in the distance, a man-made constellation of ambition and wealth. She found Ahmed there, his shoulders tense as he leaned against the railing. "I'm sorry," he said softly, not turning around. "I should have prepared you better for all of this." Sophia moved to stand beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "It's overwhelming," she admitted. "But I'm here, Ahmed. Whatever you're facing, you don't have to face it alone." He turned to her then, his eyes searching her face. "You don't know how much that means to me, Sophia. Tomorrow, at the board meeting, it's going to be war. Karim won't give up control easily, and there are others who have benefited from my absence. They'll fight to keep things as they are." Sophia reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Then we'll fight back together." As they stood there, the warm night air carrying the scent of desert flowers, Sophia felt a shift in their relationship. They were no longer just two people brought together by chance in a small mountain town. They were allies, partners in a battle that would determine not just Ahmed's future, but the future of countless people who depended on the Al-Rashid Empire. The next morning dawned bright and hot, the sun already climbing in a cloudless sky. As Sophia prepared for the board meeting, she chose a conservative suit from the wardrobe Amira had provided, steeling herself for the confrontation to come. As she made her way to Ahmed's study, she overheard raised voices. Karim had arrived early, and the cousins were already locked in heated discussion. Sophia paused outside the door, her heart racing. She knew that what happened in the next few hours would change everything. The simple life she had known in Sierra Verde seemed a lifetime away. But as she took a deep breath and reached for the door handle, she knew with certainty that this was where she was meant to be. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them at Ahmed's side. The boardroom of Al-Rashid Enterprises was a study in power and opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Dubai's skyline, while the massive oak table at the center seemed to anchor the room in tradition. As Sophia entered alongside Ahmed, she felt the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes upon her. Karim sat at the head of the table, his posture radiating confidence. "Our cousin," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "How kind of you to join us. And you've brought your friend." The pause before the last word spoke volumes. Ahmed's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Sophia is here as my advisor and partner. Her insight will be valuable to these proceedings." A murmur ran through the assembled board members. Sophia recognized a few faces from the dossiers Ahmed had shown her, influential uncles, cousins, and family friends, each with their own stake in the Al-Rashid Empire. As the meeting began, it quickly became clear that Karim had spent Ahmed's absence consolidating his power. He presented a series of reports detailing the company's growth. Under his stewardship, each slide a carefully crafted narrative of success. "As you can see," Karim concluded, his smile triumphant, "Al-Rashid Enterprises has flourished in recent years. Our expansion into emerging markets has yielded unprecedented returns." Ahmed leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And at what cost? Karim, what of our commitments to sustainable development, to the communities we've pledged to support?" Karim's smile didn't waver. "Sentimentality has no place in business, cousin. The board understands this, even if you do not." The meeting devolved into a heated debate, with board members taking sides. Sophia watched, her mind racing, as years of family history and business maneuvering played out before her. She began to see the bigger picture, how Karim's vision of unchecked growth threatened not just Ahmed's position, but the very principles upon which the Al-Rashid legacy was built. During a brief recess, Sophia pulled Ahmed aside. "We need to change the narrative," she whispered urgently. "Karim's focusing on numbers, but what about the people behind those numbers? The lives impacted by Al-Rashid's work?" Ahmed's eyes lit up with understanding. When the meeting reconvened, he took the floor with renewed purpose. "Colleagues, family," he began, his voice carrying a passion that commanded attention. "We've heard much about profits and expansion, but let me remind you of the vision that built this company." He launched into a heartfelt account of the Al-Rashid legacy, the schools built, the medical clinics funded, the sustainable energy projects that had transformed communities. As he spoke, Sophia saw the expressions of the board members begin to shift. "And now," Ahmed continued, "I'd like to introduce you to someone who embodies the impact of our work." He gestured to Sophia, who stood with a mixture of nervousness and determination. Taking a deep breath, Sophia began to speak. She told them about Sierra Verde, about the struggles her community faced, and about the transformative potential of the cultural center Ahmed had envisioned. Her words painted a vivid picture of lives changed and dreams made possible. "This," she concluded, her voice strong despite her racing heart, "is the true measure of Al-Rashid's success, not just in numbers on a spreadsheet, but in the hope we bring to people's lives." The room fell silent as Sophia finished speaking. She could see the impact of her words reflected in the faces around the table, some moved, others thoughtful, a few still skeptical. Karim was the first to break the silence, his composure slightly shaken. A touching story, to be sure, but sentiment doesn't drive business. We have shareholders to answer to, markets to conquer. What followed was a tense debate that lasted well into the evening. Board members argued passionately, old alliances were tested, and the future of Al Rashid Enterprises hung in the balance. Throughout it all, Ahmed and Sophia stood firm, presenting a united front against Karim's cold vision of profit, above all else. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the boardroom, a decision was finally reached. The board would require time to review all the information presented, including a full audit of the company's recent activities. In the meantime, Ahmed and Karim would share interim control, with major decisions requiring board approval. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. As the meeting adjourned, Sophia could see the mixture of relief and determination on Ahmed's face. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. Later that night, as they stood on the balcony of Ahmed's private study, the city lights twinkling below, Sophia felt a profound sense of the journey that lay ahead. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Ahmed turned to her, his eyes reflecting the same mix of exhaustion and hope she felt. "Now," he said, taking her hand in his, "we build. We show them that there's a better way to lead this company, and we do it together." As they stood there, the warm night air carrying the promise of challenges and triumphs to come, Sophia realized that her life had irrevocably changed. She was no longer just a nurse from a small town. She was part of something bigger, a force for change in a world she was only beginning to understand. The path ahead would be difficult, fraught with obstacles and opposition, but as she looked at Ahmed, saw the renewed purpose in his eyes, she knew that together they could face whatever came next. The legacy of Al Rashid Enterprises and the lives it touched was worth fighting for. As weeks turned into months, Sophia found herself adapting to life in Dubai with a mixture of wonder and homesickness. The glittering city was a far cry from the quiet streets of Sierra Verde, and there were moments when the sheer opulence of her surroundings left her feeling overwhelmed and out of place. Ahmed, true to his word, had thrown himself into the task of reforming Al Rashid Enterprises. With Sophia by his side, he began implementing changes that prioritized sustainable development and community impact alongside profit margins. It was a delicate balancing act, one that often left them both exhausted but determined. One particularly challenging day, as they pored over reports in Ahmed's study, Sophia found her thoughts drifting back to her grandmother and the life she'd left behind. Ahmed, noticing her distraction, gently touched her hand. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. Sophia sighed, looking out at the Dubai skyline. "I was just thinking about home, about my grandmother, the clinic. I wonder how they're managing without me." Ahmed's expression softened. "Perhaps it's time we took a trip back to Sierra Verde. We could check on the progress of the Cultural Center project, and you could visit your family." The suggestion brought a smile to Sophia's face, and within days, they were on a plane bound for the mountains of her homeland. As they descended into the familiar valley, Sophia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The sight of the town nestled among the coffee plantations filled her with a warmth she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Their arrival caused quite a stir in Sierra Verde. Word spread quickly that Sophia had returned, and with her the mysterious benefactor who had promised to transform the old mansion into a cultural center. As they made their way through the town square, familiar faces greeted them with a mixture of curiosity and excitement. The most emotional moment came when Sophia finally reunited with her grandmother. The older woman's eyes filled with tears, as she embraced her granddaughter, whispering words of love and pride. Ahmed watched the scene with a bittersweet smile, reminded of his own lost family connections. Over the next few days, Sophia and Ahmed threw themselves into the Cultural Center project with renewed vigor. They met with local artists, musicians, and educators, refining plans and addressing community needs. Sophia's intimate knowledge of the town proved invaluable, helping to bridge the gap between Ahmed's grand vision and the practical realities of life in Sierra Verde. One evening, as they walked through the town after a long day of meetings, Ahmed surprised Sophia by leading her to the plaza where they had first met. The same bench where he had sat playing his improvised instrument was empty, waiting for them. "I've been thinking," Ahmed said as they sat down, the familiar sounds of the evening settling around them. "About what you said in Dubai, about the impact we can have on people's lives." Sophia looked at him curiously, sensing there was more to come. Ahmed continued, his voice thoughtful. "Seeing this town, experiencing the warmth of your community, it's made me realize that what we're doing here is just as important as any billion-dollar deal in Dubai." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. "I want to propose something to you, Sophia, not just a partnership in business, but in life." Sophia's heart raced as Ahmed opened the box, revealing a stunning ring that somehow managed to blend the elegance of his world with the simplicity of hers. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Will you help me build a legacy that spans not just continents but touches hearts?" Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as the full weight of the moment hit her. This wasn't just a proposal, it was a promise to bridge two worlds, to create something beautiful and lasting that would benefit not just them but countless others. "Yes," she breathed, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes, I will." As Ahmed slipped the ring onto her finger, the plaza around them erupted in cheers. Unbeknownst to them, the townspeople had gathered, drawn by the rumors of their return and the hint of something special about to happen. The celebration that followed was a blend of cultures, traditional music from Sierra Verde mixed with Middle Eastern melodies, local cuisine alongside dishes Ahmed had introduced from his homeland. It was a beautiful representation of the union they were forging, not just between two people but between two worlds. As the night wore on, Sophia found a quiet moment to slip away to the clinic where she had worked for so many years. Standing in the familiar surroundings, she felt the weight of her journey. From a small-town nurse to a woman poised to help lead a global enterprise, Ahmed found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Having second thoughts?" he asked gently. Sophia leaned back into his embrace, shaking her head. "No, just realizing how far we've come, and how much further we have to go." "Together," Ahmed reminded her, kissing her temple softly. As they stood there, the sounds of celebration drifting in from outside, Sophia felt a sense of purpose settling over her. The path ahead would not be easy. There were still battles to be fought in Dubai, challenges to overcome in Sierra Verde. But with Ahmed by her side and the support of both their worlds behind them, she knew they could face anything. The night sky above Sierra Verde seemed to shimmer with possibility, a reflection of the dreams they were weaving together, dreams that would touch lives far beyond the mountains that had once defined Sophia's world. The months following Sophia and Ahmed's engagement were a whirlwind of activity that spanned two continents. In Sierra Verde, construction on the cultural center progressed rapidly, transforming the once-neglected mansion into a beacon of hope and creativity for the entire region. Meanwhile, in Dubai, the couple faced the ongoing challenge of reshaping Al Rashid Enterprises into a more socially responsible corporation. Their wedding, held in Sierra Verde, was a grand affair that brought together two vastly different worlds. The town square was transformed into a magical setting that blended Middle Eastern luxury with the rustic charm of the mountains. Guests from Dubai mingled with local farmers, artists rubbed shoulders with oil tycoons, and the air was filled with a mix of languages and music that symbolized the union not just of two people, but of two cultures. As Sophia and Ahmed exchanged vows beneath an arch woven with local flowers and draped with fine silks, the gathered crowd witnessed more than just a marriage. They saw the birth of a powerful partnership that promised to change lives on a global scale. However, their honeymoon period was short-lived. Upon their return to Dubai, they found that Karim had been busy in their absence. He had leveraged his connections to sow doubt among key board members about Ahmed's new direction for the company. One particularly tense board meeting found Sophia and Ahmed defending their vision against a barrage of skepticism. Karim, his voice dripping with false concern, addressed the room. While my cousin's humanitarian efforts are admirable, we must consider the bottom line. Our shareholders expect growth, not charity. Sophia, who had grown more confident in these corporate settings, stood to respond. With all due respect, Mr. Al-Rashid, you're presenting a false dichotomy. Our projects in Sierra Verde and similar communities are not just charity, they're investments in future markets and in the company's global reputation. She proceeded to present data showing how their initiatives had already begun to yield returns, both financially and in terms of positive press and community goodwill. Ahmed beamed with pride as he watched his wife hold her own against some of the shrewdest business minds in the Middle East. As the debate raged on, an unexpected ally emerged in the form of Amira, Ahmed's sister. She had spent time in Sierra Verde during the wedding preparations and had seen firsthand the impact of their work. Her impassioned speech about the importance of corporate responsibility tipped the scales in their favor, at least for the moment. But Karim was not one to admit defeat easily. As the meeting adjourned, he approached Sophia with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Impressive performance, my dear. You're quite the asset to my cousin. I do hope nothing unfortunate happens to jeopardize your position here." The thinly veiled threat sent a chill down Sophia's spine, but she met his gaze steadily. "Thank you for your concern, Karim. I look forward to continuing our work together for the betterment of Al-Rashid Enterprises." As Karim walked away, Ahmed joined her, his expression grave. "We need to be careful," he murmured. "Karim won't give up easily, and he has allies we may not even know about." Sophia nodded, squeezing his hand reassuringly. "Then we'll be vigilant, and we'll keep pushing forward. The work we're doing is too important to let fear hold us back." Over the next few weeks, Sophia and Ahmed redoubled their efforts. They traveled extensively, visiting Al-Rashid projects around the world and looking for opportunities to implement their new vision. Sophia's background in healthcare proved invaluable as they developed initiatives to improve medical access in underserved communities. During a visit to a remote village in Africa, where Al-Rashid was funding a new school and medical clinic, Sophia had an epiphany. As she watched children excitedly exploring their new classroom, she turned to Ahmed with tears in her eyes. "This is it," she said softly. "This is why we're fighting so hard. Every life we touch, every dream we help nurture, it all adds up to something bigger than any corporate balance sheet." Ahmed wrapped an arm around her shoulders, nodding in agreement. "You've helped me remember what's truly important, Sophia. My father always said that with great wealth comes great responsibility. I lost sight of that for a while, but you've brought me back to our family's true legacy." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by an urgent call from Dubai. Amira's voice was tense as she delivered the news. Karim had called for an emergency board meeting in their absence, claiming to have evidence of financial mismanagement in Ahmed and Sophia's projects. As they rushed to the small airstrip where their private jet waited, Sophia felt a mix of anger and determination. "He's making his move," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We knew this was coming." Ahmed nodded grimly as they boarded the plane. "Yes, but we're ready for him. We have the truth on our side and the results to back it up." As the jet took off, carrying them back to Dubai and the confrontation that awaited, Sophia gazed out the window at the African landscape below. She thought about how far she had come from her life in Sierra Verde, and about all the lives that now depended on the outcome of this corporate power struggle. She turned to Ahmed, seeing the same resolve in his eyes that she felt in her heart. Whatever Karim had planned, they would face it together. The future of Al-Rashid Enterprises and the communities it served around the world hung in the balance. As the coast of Africa receded behind them, Sophia steeled herself for the battle ahead, knowing that the true test of their vision and their partnership was about to begin. The Al-Rashid Enterprises headquarters loomed before them, its glass and steel facade reflecting the intense Dubai sun as Sophia and Ahmed rushed through the lobby. The tension in the air was palpable as they made their way to the executive floor, where the emergency board meeting was already underway. As the elevator doors opened, they were met by Amira, her face etched with worry. "It's worse than we thought," she whispered hurriedly. Karim has presented documents claiming that funds meant for the Sierra Verde project were diverted for personal use. He's calling for an immediate vote to remove Ahmed from his position. Ahmed's jaw tightened, but Sophia saw the flicker of determination in his eyes. Then we'll face this head-on, he said, squeezing Sophia's hand. Together. They entered the boardroom to a chorus of murmurs and pointed stares. Karim stood at the head of the table, a triumphant smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Ah, cousin," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "How kind of you to join us. We were just discussing some irregularities in your pet projects." Sophia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "I believe you'll find those irregularities are nothing more than clerical errors, easily explained and rectified." For the next hour, the boardroom became a battlefield of spreadsheets and financial reports. Sophia and Ahmed methodically addressed each of Karim's accusations, presenting clear evidence of the positive impact their projects were having, both financially and in terms of corporate social responsibility. As the debate raged on, Sophia noticed a shift in the room. Board members who had initially seemed swayed by Karim's arguments began to ask pointed questions, their skepticism now directed at the accuser rather than the accused. The turning point came when an unexpected ally spoke up. Hassan, the longtime family confidant who had first greeted them upon their return to Dubai, cleared his throat. "If I may," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of loyal service, "I have here documents that I believe the board should see." He produced a file, explaining that he had been conducting his own quiet investigation into the company's finances. The papers he presented painted a damning picture, not of Ahmed's supposed mismanagement, but of Karim's systematic embezzlement and manipulation of company resources. The room erupted into chaos. Karim, his face contorted with rage, lunged for the documents but was restrained by security. "This is a lie," he shouted, his composure completely shattered. "A fabrication!" Ahmed stood, his voice cutting through the tumult. "I move for an immediate external audit of all Al Rashid Enterprises' finances and projects, dating back to my departure 3 years ago. Let the truth come to light, once and for all." The vote was unanimous. As Karim was escorted from the room, still protesting his innocence, Sophia felt a wave of relief wash over her. But she knew this was only the beginning of a long process of healing and rebuilding. In the weeks that followed, the full extent of Karim's deception came to light. The audit revealed a complex web of hidden accounts and manipulated reports, all designed to enrich Karim and his closest allies at the expense of the company and its humanitarian projects. Ahmed and Sophia worked tirelessly to right the wrongs that had been done. They reached out to partners who had been cheated, rebuilt trust with skeptical board members, and redoubled their efforts on projects that had been neglected or underfunded. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of their Dubai apartment, overlooking the city they had come to call home, Ahmed turned to Sophia with a weary but contented smile. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said softly. "Your strength, your compassion, your unwavering belief in what's right, it's changed everything." Sophia leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "We did this together," she replied, "and we're just getting started." As they looked out over the glittering cityscape, Sophia's mind wandered to Sierra Verde, to the cultural center that was nearing completion, to the lives that were being transformed. She thought of her grandmother, of the clinic where she had once worked, of the path that had led her to this moment. "What's next?" she asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. Ahmed's eyes sparkled with renewed purpose. "I was thinking, why stop at one cultural center? Why not create a network of them all around the world, places where education, art and innovation can flourish, even in the most underserved communities?" Sophia's heart swelled with pride and love. This was the man she had married, not just a wealthy businessman, but a visionary who understood the true value of his inheritance. As they began to discuss the possibilities, mapping out a future that would touch lives across continents, Sophia realized that her journey had come full circle. The small-town nurse who had once dreamed of making a difference was now in a position to create change on a global scale. The challenges ahead were daunting, but as she looked at Ahmed, saw the passion in his eyes that mirrored her own, she knew they were ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had weathered a storm that would have broken lesser partnerships. Now, with the support of a revitalized Al Rashid Enterprises behind them, they were poised to write a new chapter, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of countless others around the world. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sophia and Ahmed shared a kiss that was both a celebration of their victory and a promise for the future. The legacy they were building together was just beginning, and the best was yet to come. 5 years had passed since the tumultuous events that had nearly torn apart Al Rashid Enterprises. The Dubai skyline had changed, new towers reaching even higher into the sky. But the most significant changes were not visible from the outside. Sophia stood at the podium, her voice steady as she addressed the gathered crowd of journalists, business leaders, and community representatives from around the world. Behind her, a massive screen displayed images of the various projects that had become the hallmark of the new Al Rashid Foundation. "Today we are not just celebrating the opening of our 50th Cultural and Innovation Center," she said, her eyes scanning the audience. "We are celebrating a new way of doing business, a way that recognizes that true wealth lies not in numbers on a balance sheet, but in the lives we touch and the communities we help to flourish." As Sophia spoke, Ahmed watched from the side of the stage, his heart swelling with pride. The woman he had met in a small plaza in Sierra Verde had blossomed into a powerful force for change, respected in boardrooms and rural villages alike. The presentation continued, showcasing the impact of their work. Schools in remote African villages where children now had access to world-class education through technology. Medical clinics in Southeast Asia equipped with cutting-edge telemedicine capabilities. Sustainable agriculture projects in South America that were transforming local economies while preserving delicate ecosystems. And at the heart of it all, the cultural centers, beacons of art, education, and innovation that had become gathering places for communities around the globe. Each one unique, reflecting the local culture while providing resources that many had never dreamed possible. As Sophia concluded her speech, the applause was thunderous. She stepped back, allowing Ahmed to take the podium for the final announcements. "My wife has shared with you the incredible journey we've been on," Ahmed began, his voice filled with emotion. "But today we're not just looking back, we're looking forward. I'm pleased to announce that Al Rashid Enterprises will be transitioning to a new model of ownership." A murmur ran through the crowd as Ahmed explained the details. The company would be restructured, with a significant portion of its profits permanently dedicated to funding the foundation's work. Employees at all levels would become stakeholders, and communities impacted by their projects would have a voice in decision-making processes. "This is not charity," Ahmed emphasized. "This is a recognition that our success is inextricably linked to the well-being of the communities we serve. It's a new way of doing business that we believe will set a standard for the future." As the ETI presentation concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Sophia and Ahmed found a quiet moment alone. They stood on a balcony overlooking the city, much as they had done on so many nights over the years. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Sophia asked, leaning into Ahmed's embrace. He kissed the top of her head, his voice soft with wonder. "Sometimes I still think I'm going to wake up on that bench in Sierra Verde, and all of this will have been a dream." Sophia laughed, a sound full of joy and contentment. "Well, if it is a dream, it's one we've built together. And we're not done. Yet." As if on cue, the door to the balcony opened, and a small whirlwind of energy burst through. Their 4-year-old daughter, Amira, named after Ahmed's sister who had been such a crucial ally in their darkest hour, ran to them with outstretched arms. "Mama, Papa," she cried, her eyes shining with excitement. "Can we go see the new center?" "Now, please?" Ahmed scooped her up, tickling her until she giggled. "Of course, my little philanthropist. Let's go see what you think of it." As they made their way through the building, greeting employees and guests, Sophia marveled at how seamlessly her two worlds had blended. The lessons of compassion and community she had learned in Sierra Verde now informed global policy decisions. The business acumen and resources of Al Rashid Enterprises were being channeled into projects that honored the values she had always held dear. They stepped out into the Dubai heat, a car waiting to take them to the newly completed Cultural and Innovation Center. As the city passed by outside the window, Sophia thought about the journey that had brought them here. The challenges they had faced, the moments of doubt, the triumphs that had seemed impossible. She thought of her grandmother, who had lived to see the first center open in Sierra Verde, and had passed away knowing that her granddaughter was changing the world. She thought of Karim, who had eventually faced justice for his crimes, but whose actions had ultimately led to this transformation of the company. As they arrived at the new center, a crowd of eager faces greeted them. Children from the local community, artists setting up exhibits, young entrepreneurs ready to use the state-of-the-art facilities to launch their ideas into the world. Sophia and Ahmed exchanged a glance, no words necessary between them. This was their legacy, not the buildings or the business empire, but the lives they were touching, the opportunities they were creating, the future they were helping to shape. As little Amira ran ahead, eager to explore every corner of the new center, Sophia took Ahmed's hand. "Ready for the next chapter?" she asked, her eyes shining with the same passion that had first brought them together. Ahmed squeezed her hand, his smile radiant. "With you? Always." Together, they stepped forward into the bustling center, ready to continue the work of building a legacy that would echo through generations to come. The story of the nurse from Sierra Verde and the disillusioned heir who had found each other and, in doing so, had found a way to change the world was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning.